Hey everybody, Papa Todd here. If you're starting to overcome your fears, you're wanting to get outside and do some more hiking, just experiences outside, going to your local parks or maybe some state parks where you've got more things to experience, beautiful things, get out there and enjoy life a little bit, right? So one of the thoughts I had when I was taking my kids places and trying to get them prepared, the next step was really kind of learning the basics of navigation and a little bit of lost proofing so that you're heightening your awareness a little bit to your surroundings and where you're at. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. If that's a topic you want to learn more about, stick around, we'll talk some more. So there's 4 key things that you can do to keep yourself from getting lost. The first is just basic directional principles. Just knowing directions seems to be a challenge for some people. Nothing wrong with that. Totally understand why. But trying to improve that is a skill that you can easily do. So there's some basic things in direction that will help you kind of understand, right? One of the first things I always taught my kids was to imagine you were an eagle flying high above the area that you're at, and using that bird's eye view in a comparison for a map to begin to see certain things in the landscape. So the second thing is just simply being able to use a map and compass. I would get the simplest, most basic compass that there is, make sure it has a clear bottom, and we're going to want to set that directly on top of a map. Now, the more detailed the map, the closer the map, the better. A terrain map, especially if you're going to be gone all day and you've got a big area you're going to be covering. The key thing to remember is don't adjust the compass, because the compass is telling you what the direction is. You want to adjust the map. You'll spin the map underneath the compass and align north on the map with north on the compass. Next, you want to identify those landmarks, those hilltops, and those creek bottoms, the highs and lows. Next, you want to be able to follow a bearing. How do we do that? First, we point the compass in the direction that we want to go. Next, you want to adjust the bezel, which is the portion of the compass that spins near the base, to north. Then you simply begin to walk the bearing. Next, you want to continue to check that often so that you know you are still on the bearing directionally as you head down the path or the direction you're trying to go. One of the most basic things that you learn as a kid in scouting is to follow the sun, right? In the morning, most of us all know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So its directional path tells us typically time of day and where we can be looking for a general direction. How do we know it's near noon? We look down and we see no shadows, not of our own or none of the trees. So we know high noon, more difficult time of the day to navigate. So it's a little bit more different. You'll have to rely on some other techniques potentially during that time of day. So trees can tell us a lot about direction. Typically, in most parts of where we're at, North America, you will see moss growing on the north side of trees, or maybe just heavier, thicker on the north side of trees. And in locations where you get a lot of rain and a lot of moisture, you might see it all the way around. So that thicker portion is typically on the north side of trees. Another aspect to think of is wind patterns. Certain times of year, we have directional winds that come from certain direction, obviously. So being able to recognize where the wind is coming from is a great indicator of what direction you might be headed. Another natural navigation method would be water and waterways. A lot of times larger rivers, larger creeks tend to flow in certain directions. If you know your landmass, your regional land masses, where the major ridges are, you could typically know on one side of the ridge, all the water's flowing in this direction generally, and on the other side of the ridge, it's flowing that direction generally. So overall, take a look at those waterways and before you go and get a general idea of what the water directions are. And the fourth item is stay oriented. A number of methods that you can do, the first of which is usually walk about 100 yards and turn around, look at the path, kind of take a snapshot in your mind, a picture, see some key things on that path and remember them. Build a story in your head with those key things so that you feel as though you could remember it should you need to return in that direction. Another great way is just mark your path. Sometimes you find a clearing or a crossroads in which two paths meet. It's a really good idea to mark the path that you came from should you need to retrace your steps. This can be done with flags. I don't typically like using flags. They're very visible, so it's kind of handy. Be sure and get biodegradable if you're going to carry some with you. Another way of doing it is stacking rocks or building a picture of rocks on the ground to show where you came from and maybe point the direction to which you are going. That way, if others find it, they'll be told basically just from the rocks on the ground which direction you went. Kind of as a general rule, you may want to count your paces when you do go certain directions, especially if there's no path. Typically 60 paces equals 100 yards. And if you're marking that 100 yards every time, especially if it's visible, it's a good idea to make your flagging or your rocks kind of resemble that type of pattern. That way, if you're giving a pattern, others can start to recognize the pattern, and it's easier for them when they're trying to do a search pattern, a search grid. Another way to stay oriented is just kind of follow those linear types of patterns in nature, and that can be rivers, ridge lines, or even power lines. We have a lot of power lines in the middle of nowhere sometimes you come across, and being able to follow those can kind of keep the patterns a bit more relevant to you. And when others see you following that pattern, if they are trying to track you, it makes it real easy for them to jump ahead quicker and cut sign much further ahead. So ultimately, if you start to feel lost, the right thing to do is just stop. When I say stop, that's the key word, S-T-O-P. S does stand for stop. We want you to stop completely in your tracks. And next is think. That's the T in stop. You need to think, calm yourself down if you're starting to feel a little bit agitated or a little bit emotional. We don't want that to escalate. So just start using your logical brain and start thinking about, okay, am I really lost? How far could I be away? Just start thinking some very rational thoughts. The next is observe. So S-T-O, observe. Take a good look around. Point out those things again. Look for those landmarks. Look behind you. See if you can see the picture, the last picture you took in your mind, and see if you can retrace your steps. But before you do, make a plan. In other words, mark where you're at right then and there, and then go back to where you think you were, always keeping an eye on that spot in which you said, I think I might be lost. So the plan would be make some circles, larger circles and even larger circles, till you feel like you found the path in which you came in. A key point would be to avoid wandering. Wandering and meandering around in no particular direction, doing it without a plan, is only going to intensify and make things more difficult. You have to remember, your steps make marks, and those marks might be something that we need to use to track and find you. So be aware, every step can make that more difficult, especially if you're wandering in multiple directions, no clear path. To that point, especially if it's children, staying put is really the best option. A moving target is much harder to find than a stationary target. So staying put and coming up with a key plan is always a good idea. Waiting for just an hour can make a huge difference in being able to find someone. Most people that stay put tend to be found faster than the moving targets. I look at moving around as when I'm out of options, when I feel like staying put is definitely not going to make me survive, then move. But until then, stay put and do some planning, and keep yourself warm if it's cold out, keep yourself hydrated, preserve your energy. All that can be put to the task later on if need be. Now, this next method for being found or lost proofing, it can be a little bit controversial nowadays. So we live in a world, unfortunately, where we have a lot of bad actors out there, people doing bad things. And if it's a child, a lot of times they may need to be very careful when being found. We want them to be found by the right people, so to speak. So being able to teach a child to hide a little bit, being able to not necessarily be found until we're ready to be found by the right people. We want to hear the right things coming out of searchers' mouths, which should be coming out nonstop. We don't want to be found by very quiet, very sneaky people who might not necessarily be with a group of people. We want to find that group. We want to know that there's plenty of searchers out there. So one of the key things that we've heard about is a whistle. 3 blasts of a whistle is a sign of someone lost or in distress. It's kind of like the SOS, but it's with sound. Being able to do that quite often and staying put when you do that. Don't be wandering around when you're doing that. Have a spot picked out where you can actually hide should you start to hear someone coming. Typically, searchers, you're going to hear from a long ways away if they hear that whistle especially. And you want to hear multiple voices from multiple different directions possibly coming after you to find you. In that case, you're going to feel a little bit more confident. They should be wearing highly visible clothing. They should potentially have dogs with them or other things like that. So those are key things to look out for when dealing with children who might be lost. These things need to be taught. How do we teach our kids? We start with the simple things. We start with games. We start with, can you pick out landmarks? What's unique in our landscape right here, right now, that's different when you look at everything, right? That could be a very tall hill, a very unique tree. It could be a lone tree, as mentioned, out in the middle of a field. It could be a lone boulder or rock or outcropping. All of those things might be unique and typical things that you would want to be able to identify a child, helping them kind of see the landscape and become more aware of their surroundings. Just showing a map of some sort, or maybe even bringing out a compass and kind of showing how it works, just playing a game. Can you find this with just a map, and point it out? But one of the best ways to get kids involved is just sharing stories. It doesn't have to be your story, it can be somebody else's story. It could be a story of someone getting lost and found. It could be a story of someone out hunting, got turned around. Little things like that to get their mind to thinking that, the technology that we have today is not necessarily something that we can always count on. I highly advise you to avoid technical phones with GPS, all the other types of devices that are out there that are handheld that typically help you, find locations and waypoints throughout, right? It seems very convenient. It seems like, it's something that, is super easy to do. But guess what? Cell phones and all these things, they have batteries, they die, right? What's going to happen then? What happens when they lose cell service? Oh, I've got satellite service. Okay. Again, don't rely on these technical things. Know how to do the basics. Always keep a hard map with you. Plan ahead. Know your path. Know where you're going to start. Know where you're going to end. Tell people where you're going and when you expect to return. All those things are crucial if you don't show up. I always tell folks that, had their kids are out running around, they don't necessarily know where they're at, and they've taken them on vacation somewhere, they don't know the terrain. be sure and tell those kids, okay, but only for an hour or only for X amount of time. That way, you know, if they haven't shown up, I need to take some steps. Contact authorities, tell them what your kids were wearing, tell them what they were going to go do, how long they were going to be out there, and if at all possible, if they've got an extra set of shoes, you want to share those shoes with them if they have any trackers at all. Those are key for trackers, and we can get into tracking. If you really want to get into some deep dive tracking, I love it. Been trained by some amazing people, both in Border Patrol, that have hundreds and hundreds of cases of documented tracking cases where they found kids and fugitives, you name it. A lot of different fun things that we can talk about and do there if you wanted to. So leave a comment down below if you like that. If you like today's topic, just if you don't mind, like and subscribe. Really, it goes a long way to help me kind of continue to do more of these videos.